You don't need to be making big long-term decisions in the height of, I'm going to say hysteria, but when your emotions are completely disarray, they're all over the place. And that's just not the time to make huge decisions. Those are times to ground, make small decisions every single day that actually move the needle forward.
Life has a way of bringing us chapters we never expected to write. Chapters that ask us to rethink our future, rediscover who we are, and reach deep inside to find the strength we may not have known that we had. And while those moments can feel overwhelming when we are living through them, they can also become the beginning of something entirely new and entirely yours. I'm so excited to introduce you to a dear friend of mine, LeAnn Lazar, who is an executive life and relationship coach, a certified NLP practitioner, and creator of the Realigning with Purpose approach. LeAnn helps people make sense of what is happening and move from emotional chaos in their lives to clarity. She guides her clients through the work of strengthening boundaries, navigating difficult relationships, communicating with intention, rebuilding confidence, and making thoughtful decisions about what comes next, even in the midst of an enormous life reset. Her work lives at the intersection of emotional intelligence and practical strategy, because when somebody is moving through the end of a marriage, it is never only the relationship that must be addressed. There may be children to protect, finances to understand, homes and routines to reorganize, identities to reclaim, and an entirely new future to begin reimagining, often while the heart is still trying to process exactly what happened. This conversation is especially meaningful to me because LeAnn and I have been close friends for many years, and I've also lived through this experience. And I understand how difficult it can be to see beyond the moment that you're in while your life feels like it's swirling around you and the ground is unstable. I don't believe that human beings are designed to handle so much fundamental change at once. So how lucky was I when I had LeAnn to help me through the end of my marriage, which is why I'm so excited to talk with her today, and so that you can get the support that you need. And if you're not in this particular moment, please send this episode to someone who is, because it is sure to bring clarity in moments that can be impossible to process. The most important thing for everyone to know is that no matter where you are, you will get through it, even when you cannot see the way forward. Even when life ahead feels impossible to imagine, there is the other side, and there is a life waiting for you there. Even the strongest and most capable person can lose perspective when the emotional and the practical collide. Your heart may be breaking at the exact same time life is demanding that you make some of the most consequential decisions of your life. And that's where LeAnn comes in. LeAnn has an extraordinary ability to bring calm to chaos, clarity to uncertainty, and structure to a chapter that can otherwise feel overwhelming to navigate. She helps people understand that moving forward does not mean denying what happened. It means doing the work now so that the rest of your life can unfold with greater clarity, confidence, possibility, and happiness. Today, we're talking about what it takes to move through the divorce with dignity, and while you're protecting your children, navigating co-parenting through hurt and conflict sometimes, not always, but rebuilding your identity, and eventually opening yourself up to dating, intimacy, relationships, and love again. By becoming the person you are now ready to be and building the life that reflects who you have become. LeAnn, welcome to the Ambition Code. I'm so happy you're here. Okay, so divorce, one of the hardest things in life. Divorce can be one of the most destabilizing experiences in a person's life, as we know. What is actually happening emotionally with people, psychologically and practically, when someone realizes that the life that they built in their marriage is ending?
Yes, divorce is very destabilizing. It is truly an abrupt identity shift. That's why all of those elements really come into play, because it is your entire identity. What happens from what you were saying emotionally, it's just a lot of emotion and different layers all happening at the same time. And so it's hard to stabilize. And psychologically, your brain is really trying to hold on to the familiar, which is what you're coming out of, even if it wasn't stable, even if it was chaotic, or it could have been very easygoing. Whatever it was is still an abrupt shift. And so that's where your brain and your emotions are all over the place, because it's like everything in your entire world has changed. So I like to say, and it's the hard thing to do, but you have to give yourself compassion, and you really have to lean into the emotions that are coming up. And what most people do, and just our default as a human, is to distract from pain. That's going to be anything. It could be vices. It could be talking. It could be doing anything else to not feel pain. And so when I work with clients, and a huge encouragement for anyone is, You just have to allow yourself to move through the emotions of what's going on. And that's, hard to do. But when you have guidance and when you have allow yourself and give yourself the permission to do it, it takes on a different type of healing journey.
Yeah. What happens when they don't want to feel? They just keep themselves busy at the beginning just to try to avoid what they ultimately have to go through to get to the other side.
It just prolongs feeling uncertain. Your nervous system is dysregulated. You're not sleeping. Your body is just in a fight or flight mode. It just prolongs that.
Yeah.
Because it's fear. It also fuels the fear.
Yeah. The decision to get separated in the first place is a huge one. I mean, it's not just like, hey, let's get separated. Like there's a lot that comes before that. And then divorce, it can require someone, once you decide to do it, you then have to understand that it might mean rebuilding financially at the same time that someone's going through this big change in their life. With all the practical decisions that are coming, how do you navigate the emotional side of it and the practical?
It's difficult to navigate in any situation, and everyone's situation is their own. It's their own little microbiome or world that they're in. But the through line is truly just evaluating everything, taking ownership of your financial story. Like, what was it in the marriage? What was it before? What is it for you individually? From a financial place, having clarity and evaluating all that helps give you control, which allows you to have a footing in some capacity in your life, because when you're going through that divorce, everything is unstable. Everything is uncertain. So when you can ground yourself in certain facts and certain practices and routines that you have control over, that allows you to start to evaluate your priorities. And what I always suggest is, what are your priorities? Typically, it's your kids, it's your living situations, your work, your job, your side gigs, your resources, all of those things. Like, take inventory of what your priorities are, because they will shift. You have immediate priorities, and then you also have long-term priorities, but we have to stick with what we can handle first. And so that's what I tend to do, is just suggest breaking those things down for yourself. Those will also ground you in how you're creating a new routine for yourself and where you're shifting your focus.
Yeah. How do you manage the emotion the breakups can be very hard, especially when this could be the most important relationship that you've had in your life? Like, how do you manage the emotions and how hard they can be to navigate with making these decisions? It's a lot. It's a lot for one person.
It is a lot, and each person is going through it in a parallel way, right? And you're having to make decisions collectively, usually, and then you're also having to make decisions independently. So really, for what I suggest is, like I said, making these priorities, grounding yourself in certainty in some capacity and giving yourself some control. That will help regulate the spiral of emotions. I also suggest types of practices you can do. I mean, one of the ones that I really love is, I call it the 3-3-3 reset, where, you take 3 deep breaths. You're kind of calming yourself, centering yourself. You have then 3 thoughts, or say 3 things you're grateful for, and then list 3 priorities. And that just kind of shifts you out of emotion into practical thinking. And that's really helpful, because we act from how we feel. And when we feel unsettled and we feel scattered, we're making decisions from that place. So I always like to suggest grounding and certain practices to stabilize yourself, because there's also a process to, you don't need to be making big long-term decisions in the height of, I'm going to say, hysteria, but
Yeah.
when your emotions are completely disarray, they're all over the place. And that's just not the time to make huge decisions. Those are times to ground, make small decisions every single day that actually move the needle forward.
Yeah. There are some things that I wanted to do like right away, just things in life. Like, I wanted to make the decision about who was going to be my partner and if I was going to, move somewhere. And everyone's like, you're just not ready to make any of those decisions. Trust me. I was like, I think I am. But they were ultimately right. It's a very difficult little chapter, but Then you get to move on. After a long marriage, let's say, you don't only lose the partnership, but also their identity as a spouse, as part of a couple, as a member of an intact family. How do you begin to discover who you are outside of a marriage?
That's so huge. Outside of a marriage, I mean, we tend to think of it as a failure, and it's not a failure. Divorce is a transition. It's like a new job. It's like moving to a new place, entering a new environment or relationship. I mean, it is a transition. And your identity, like I said in the beginning, is really attached to this old version of yourself. And so you just have to sit with yourself, and there's a lot of inner work. There's a lot of work that goes into rediscovering who you are, asking yourself, who was I in this dynamic as a marriage? What was my role here? Am I needed? What do I want to grow into? So you start digging and asking yourself these questions to start creating a new identity for yourself. But it also requires you to let go of some of the stories and some of the patterns. And I know for myself, I had a really hard time letting go of my identity as the wife and the CEO of the home. And that didn't change other than I was no longer a wife. I was still the CEO of my home. I am still a mother. It just looked different in my routine and what I was responsible for and making decisions for.
Yeah. And a lot of times in a long marriage, you kind of rediscover who you were beforehand too, like things you may have forgotten, which helps you move forward, which I thought was true in my life.
Yeah, absolutely. And rediscovering aspects of yourself because, yes, when you're in a long marriage and you're having kids, priorities shift because,
Yeah.
again, you're raising a family and it's hard to do all of it at the same time, even if you're in a healthy marriage. So, again, just because it was a sense of losing a sense of yourself, it's also situational, right? For that period of time. Like you and I both in this place in our life, we have teenagers. We
Hmm.
have, older children that are not requiring the same amount. And so that's also a transition as a mom and what your
Hmm.
responsibilities are. So it always is going to happen. It's just so abrupt when you go through severing the relationship and the dynamic and the life that you had.
Yeah. Beauty in rediscovering myself immediately afterwards to a certain degree. I realized how much I loved yoga, how much I loved to dance, how much I loved flowers all over my house, how much I reestablished old relationships of people I haven't talked to in a while. There's so much of me that I rediscovered that I
Mhm.
considered it the reintroduction of myself to myself period. And
Mhm.
that was really incredible because coming from a more mature perspective now, decades later, I have not really changed. That person has always been inside. And now I'm going to sort of re-embrace it as I evolve into the future.
Absolutely. And you did the work to also discover that and you gave yourself the permission to explore it. And I think that's the other side of it is we get so wrapped up in responsibility and caring for other people as a parent, as a mother,
Right.
and a responsibility in that dynamic that you do lose your sense of self to some degree. But it's also reevaluating those things, right? When you're running the ship and doing all the things, and a lot of women do, that's what happens. It doesn't mean that you don't have that on your plate, but it does
Mhm.
mean that you do have to take time for yourself. And that rediscovery of who you are, so many women are scared to do it because then
Mhm.
there's those other feelings of regret or, I didn't do what I wanted to do or I, didn't hit the goals that I meant to hit. That also comes with emotion, right?
Yeah.
And you can reset. You get to reset at any point.
Yeah.
Divorce is a perfect time to reset. It's a perfect time to rediscover those aspects of yourself. And I think, as you start to bring that back to life, those things about yourself, you become a different mom. You
Yeah.
become a different version of yourself that just is more open.
Yeah. Someone mentioned to me the other day something about euphoric recall. Can you talk a little bit about what that is?
Do believe it is just that awakening. It's that rediscovery of things that you enjoyed in the past and stepping into it and allowing yourself to do it.
Yeah. And in the context of the conversation I was having, a woman was telling me that a friend of mine often just goes right back to the most incredible parts of the marriage and the relationship, like the beginning, 10 years and how incredible it was. And that's all that she could remember for a long time. She didn't remember the end of the bad things that led to the divorce or how like impossible the actual divorce was. She only remembered the good things. And she said her therapist referred to that as euphoric recall. And I definitely identify with that because I went through that as well.
Yes, and that's what I was talking about at the beginning of our conversation. Your brain wants to keep you safe and familiar. So
Yeah.
your brain is only going to allow you to recall the things that were pleasurable, that were fun, because that is familiar,
Yeah.
right? Trauma tends to get packed away in another section. That's why when you go through a breakup, even if you've been dating someone for 3 months or 6 months, you don't remember all the things they didn't do. You just remember those little bitty moments, right, of excitement because you're connected to that emotion. And
Yeah.
that's what you're wanting.
So speaking of dating, at a certain point, people do want to date again, but it can be really, really scary because for many people, they haven't dated anyone, since they're 19 years old. When do you know that you're emotionally ready to date? You're not rushing into it.
Yeah, I love this. This is a question that I get a lot. And I don't think there's ever just a moment in time where you're totally ready. It's a bit of an evolution. And I think that going back to where you are in your life, you're not 22, you're not
Right.
30. You're in a different phase of life. There's so many aspects of you that have developed and you've had experiences and you have to date from where you are today, not the image of what you thought things were before. The dating world changes, the dating pool changes, the dynamics, the social nuances that exist. Like you have to learn what those are so that you're feeling equipped to really not get number one taken advantage of or feel naive in certain ways. And so I think there's a little bit of research and a little bit of kind of conversation that needs to happen before you really step out there and put it out there. Some people just jump off and they're like, we're in, I'm in the pool, we're swimming around and let's see what happens. But I think it's about grounding and really connecting with who you are. Because again, you don't want to repeat patterns that didn't work before. So, when it comes to, am I ready? What does that look like? It's really about how do I stay rooted and grounded in who I am and keeping my heart open.
Right. And protecting your heart. Tell us about the experience of falling in love for the first time again after a divorce and then breaking up.
It's the first relationship after a divorce that is the most profound. It's the most amazing, the most grounded, all the things that didn't happen or that you were wanting from the marriage that feels so good. And that's a bit of a trap to fall into because you're not looking for red flags. You're completely unaware of what to do because you're fulfilling those voids that you had typically. And that is really the hardest relationship, I think, to get through because your expectation, the pleasure, the fun, the excitement that's happening in that first relationship, and then you're not really set up for what that's going to look like long term, or you think it's going to be long term and it's not long term. And it's heartbreaking. And it opens you up in a different way. And a lot of women and even men that I've worked with say that was almost the harder heartbreak than the divorce in some ways because there was this newer version of themselves that had come alive that they
Mhm.
hadn't had or hadn't experienced. And a lot of people experience like a lot of newness in that first relationship. So again, it still goes back to anytime you're in a heartbreak situation, divorce, long-term breakup at all, it's about not losing your sense of self. If you are more grounded, if you have a realistic expectation, you're having open communication about things, it doesn't have to be so devastating, but usually that's not what people are doing. They are just emotionally in it. But if you're having a healthy conversation to say, look, our lives are not lined up. Like, I really would love for this at a different time in my life to have happened, and it didn't. That's typically not what
Mhm.
conversations are. But if you can get to that place and say, look, you're older, you're not 20, you're not just running off hormones and chemistry and all that. But if you are, then you're going to act like a teenager. You're going to get heartbroken. You're
Mhm.
going to have to go through that whole cycle again. So there's a way to navigate it and just being more conscious and more aware and more open to communication about it. But it does happen. Yeah.
Yeah. I remember in my first relationship outside the marriage, I felt like I was on a roller coaster with my hands tied behind my back and no brakes. And I remember saying, I remember saying, it's me. I'm the problem. I'm not ready. Like that's all I could think about was that image. And I wasn't I did not know how to be alone because had
Right.
been partnered for so long, but I was not ready. And that was a very weird space to be in. But I have to say, all those emotions, all of those trials and tribulations really help you rebuild who you are and what you want and
Mhm.
what you're comfortable with, because those skills are just like, they don't exist when you're married, really, because you're so used to the person and you've already established that a long time ago.
Mhm.
So,
Yeah, which is hard. It's hard because that's the biggest thing is, are you dating because you're lonely and you don't know how to be by yourself? That's so common.
yeah,
I don't know how to be okay in a space alone or not have any like communication, connection, attention, affection, all of those things. It's very jarring. So
yeah.
yeah, when you're sitting on that roller coaster and your hands are behind your back, you're like, who's holding my hands? Is it me? Is it them? You know,
Right. I'm just going to crash like that.
I'm
That's
just
how I
gonna
felt.
crash. Yeah.
So, speaking of, you said lonely. What's the difference between feeling lonely after a divorce, wanting companionship, wanting intimacy, and being ready for an actual real relationship?
I don't think you know initially. I think that's the answer is one of the things is being able to sit with yourself and know. And it's okay if you say and admit, look, I want to date because I don't want to be at home at night because the emotions come up, the feelings are coming up.
Hmm.
That's still being honest with yourself, right? It's when you are out filling the time and not knowing that you're actually doing it as a distraction. So, yeah, when loneliness, I think, also comes in different forms after divorce. That's also a part of grieving. The loneliness is also, I think, people are avoiding grieving the loss of the family, grieving the loss of the dynamic and these identities and things like that. So, I don't know that you're ever 100% ready to always step back into a relationship. Again, it's a bit of a trial and error. However, knowing and grounding yourself. And I go back to that. And I know that just sounds like a bit of a repeat, but the more you know yourself and the version that you are, the better able you are to even enjoy who you're with. It could be friends. It doesn't just have to be a relationship, right? It's just time with other people. When you're with other people, when you are dating, what are you talking about? If you're just talking about your divorce on all of your dates, that's not going to really
Right.
lead to a relationship, right? It's just going to be like, all right, let's next, what's happening?
Like,
But
he's not ready. She's not ready.
not ready. They're still like nobody wants to sit across from someone and hear about their ex and their divorce and their
Yeah.
that's just not anyone that's in that dynamic of dating after divorce, that's the last thing they want to have dinner with
I
someone like
know. Oh
that.
my God, totally.
Yeah.
When you're starting to date somebody and you spent decades with somebody else, how do you learn to trust your own judgment? Because some people have no idea what they want, and some people, they don't want to make the same mistakes. How do you trust someone new?
I think this is a huge I always give a lot of exercises when I'm working with someone because it allows you to kind of do a deep dive in yourself. One of the things that you have to evaluate is your value of relationship, your value of behaviors and how you receive love, how you give love. Like there's so many aspects that you need to know for yourself. And I really like to give this example. It's called the independence and connection map. And it's basically where you kind of draw a line down the center of the map of a piece of paper. And one is being independent and one is connection. Like what habits and boundaries do I have around my independence and equally being in connection? And where do those columns match up? Where it's just creating a new blueprint for yourself. That's really important because when you're in a long-term relationship, you don't really think for yourself. You're thinking collectively, right? So it's an opportunity to really evaluate yourself as an independent person and see what you really enjoy, what you do. Like when you give love and receive love, what are those behaviors for yourself? What is that to look for in somebody else? That's how you start to build trust within yourself because you're not just taking something for face value and what someone is saying, you're actually looking at behavior, which goes back to all the talk all the time about red flags. How do I notice a
Mhm.
red flag? What's going on? This exercise and exercises like this help establish what you're going to tolerate, what you're going to enjoy, how you're going to interact. That builds your own self confidence in trusting yourself again and not
Mhm.
overlooking things and being confident enough to say, it's just not aligned. It's not about being pretty enough. It's not about being enough or not enough and not wanted or not attractive enough. It's that we just don't align on the
Mhm.
things that are really my core value.
So you have written a lot about the danger of falling in love with someone's potential and rather than observing their present behavior. So what are the most common red flags of newly divorced people?
Ooh,
What do they overlook?
I think people overlook like accountability, number one. Like when someone is saying something to you and not following through with it, that's a big thing. After divorce, you usually are dating someone that's also been divorced or has kids. So I think a lot of times family responsibilities, personal responsibilities get muddy with someone's commitment to something. So I think it's about evaluating, is this true? Is this an excuse? Do they want to spend time with me? That's a huge one is accountability.
Hmm.
Following through with what they say they're going to do. If they say they're going to call you, they call you. If they say they're going to call you and they don't call you, that's a red flag. I also
Yeah.
think being vague in details around making plans or around why they couldn't call you or things like that. I think being vague is also a big one. Love bombing. I mean, that's a term that's gone around for a long time because it's what you want. You want
Yeah.
someone to treat you and be all about you instantly because it feels good, right? And
Mhm.
especially if you've got chemistry going and that's a very strong thing, it's like, oh my God, this is amazing. Okay, take a step back. What is actually amazing? Is it that I like the way I feel when I'm with this person? What are they actually doing? So it's also evaluating behaviors, which it can be difficult, but I think it's also falling into mistaking chemistry for connection. How are
Yeah.
you connecting outside of physically being attracted to this person or verbal, communication? Like I know a lot of women love intelligent men and those words and those stories are just intoxicating. How are you connecting? That's another red flag is just mistaking that chemistry for connection.
Yeah, for sure. And it's interesting because I feel like if someone wants to be with you, they will show up and call you when you're supposed to. Like they will do the things that any normal human would do if they want to be with you. And if they really don't care, then they're not calling you when they said that they should. And that's where I think some people don't recognize and they start making excuses for because they hope for something to be what it's actually not.
Exactly. And that falls back into like people pleasing and am I enough? And so that's a you issue of like getting that attention and encouragement, right? Those are the things. And that's why I talk about grounding yourself and rooting yourself in the things that you feel confident about. Maybe it's your accomplishments. Maybe it's the way that you have done certain things and the routines that you have, the networks you have, like whatever it is you do outside of a romantic connection. That
Yeah.
really helps ground you, especially when you're showing up to new dates. And look, after divorce, you're
Mhm.
going on a lot of first dates, right?
I also think being independent as a person is really important and helpful. Like you don't need anybody else and they don't need anybody else, but you want to be together, which is different than a marriage because you're this whole total package thing when you're married. But when you're looking for your next partner, independence, in my opinion, feels so key.
It does feel key. And also the reset, I think a lot of times people get swept up into someone's lifestyle and what
Mhm.
they do. And you're like, well, that seems fun. And I'm going to do this and that'll be great. We can do that. And that can also be a red flag of hopping all over the world and all over the country without having a real sense of grounding or connection because it's different, right? When you're divorced and even coming out when you're married and you've got kids for a long time, there's a lot of routine and monotony. So it's exciting to do something different, right? But going back to what you were saying about being independent, date yourself. And I know that that's kind of a cliche thing to say, but like treat yourself the way someone else would treat you. So that when it does show up, it's not novel. It's just
Mhm.
an extension of how you already treat yourself. And I think that's also something that women don't do. They will not do for themselves and want it from other people and expect it from other people. When that doesn't happen, it's like, oh, they don't like me. It's like, well, are you going to go after someone that doesn't do for themselves? and
Right.
always waiting for you. So you always have to be in the shoes of the other person, so to speak. When someone's, looking at you and wanting to be with you, like, what are you bringing to the table?
Right. Let's talk honestly about sex. Because after decades with one partner, what are most people afraid of when becoming physically intimate with someone new?
It's a big one. I think usually it's fear of judgment,
Hmm.
fear of like insecurities, things like that, and safety. I think that's another aspect. I think women in general are more open intimately when they feel safe. And if you're coming from a place where that wasn't really part of what you had, it's not familiar. So how are you creating safety in that situation to be
Hmm.
vulnerable, to be open, to be allow someone into your physical space, personal space, intimate space? But I think those are the biggest things. I think the fear of being taken advantage of, the fear of heartbreak again, or liking
Hmm.
that person again and being connected to that person, not going anywhere. So all of that stuff comes into play for sure.
So, what happens when the body is ready for intimacy, but the heart is not because it's still obviously been wounded and repairing? Or when the heart is open to reconnection, but the body feels shut down for whatever reason?
I think it's a disconnection of yourself, truly. And I think it's a disconnection of really honoring your heart and
Hmm.
giving yourself the time and the attention that it needs to be ready. A lot of people don't do that, and they
Hmm.
rush into it, and then it gets really muddy and really cloudy, which just brings more chaos. And I like suggesting reconnecting with yourself.
Uh-huh.
That could be like a new body lotion that you just love putting on every day. It could be a new scent. It could be like so many different aspects of just reconnecting with yourself, but honoring your heart.
Hmm.
And your body is, when you see someone that's attractive, you're going to be like, oh, yeah, that's great. But just don't have too many expectations until you're ready.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to know when you are ready, but taking a step forward is still a step forward, right?
Absolutely. And just being honest with yourself. I just want to date because I want to have fun. I'm not ready for a relationship. Like, just
Right.
that's being honest with yourself, and that's honoring being truthful. It's
Yeah.
I'm going to go on this date and maybe this is going to be my next husband. Like, that's very unrealistic. You're setting yourself up for disaster.
Right.
That's a really unrealistic expectation, and it's a lot of pressure
Yeah.
on meeting someone. If you're going to meet someone and in your head, it's like, I don't want to go on a lot of dates. I just want this to be the person because so
Hmm.
far on paper, they look like what I want. It's a lot of pressure. You don't
Yeah.
show up as your authentic self. You
Right.
show up like in your interview mode, your dream state and dream vision board. And it's like, no, that's not who they're coming to meet either, typically, right?
Right. I think the key is to stay present and not to have any expectations and just enjoy the ride. Once you get too far ahead of yourself, you can do exactly what you just said. You set yourself up for disappointment.
Yeah, but it's hard. And it's easier to say don't have expectations than it is to do it. But just have a routine around one of the things I like to do. This is what I recommend to everyone that I coach on dating is 5 minutes before you go to the date, 5 minutes before you walk out the door, name things that bring you joy about yourself, an accomplishment, something that you just did, anything that just give yourself recognition for who you are. That way it takes the pressure off getting that approval, so to speak, or attention from that other person.
Yeah, that's so smart. When people get divorced, the relationship isn't usually very healthy at the end. So once you're dating, suddenly, let's say you discover or you are in a healthy relationship, which feels different to you and maybe feels like, I don't know, less exciting or even uncomfortable to someone accustomed to the instability or anxiety or emotional inconsistency that they had before.
Mhm.
What's your advice to people to embrace something like this?
It's an opportunity to reevaluate your value of relationship, really, because some people have healthy relationships, some people don't have healthy relationships. Like you said, if you're anxiety driven or instability or all of those things are coming into play and you maybe feel bored in a relationship, it's time to just reevaluate. And I call it the relationship alignment audit, which again is another exercise that allows you to kind of write down your 5 top core values. How are you aligned? How does this relationship align? Where are the gaps? Again, another way to ground yourself, to just really take inventory. And we don't do it. If we were doing that in our marriage throughout the whole time, typically you wouldn't end up in the place of being divorced. It's just you have to put the work in for that. But I think it's a perfect
Mhm.
opportunity. Sometimes a healthy relationship, the value is safety, calm. Those values might be something you didn't think about before.
Mhm.
Stability, honest conversation where they don't get angry or they're not, all of those things you get to evaluate for yourself because they may have stronger pull than things when you were younger.
That's so true. Okay, cut to the next stage. You've met somebody, you're in a healthy relationship, you want to move forward with them. What conversations should happen before blending families or combining finances or living together or considering even marriage again?
Huge. It's so
Yeah.
huge. And I don't think it's really any different than what should happen initially because we have so many opportunities to do it now before you get married initially. But especially after divorce, you have your kids, you've got your dynamic with your ex, you've got so many
Mhm.
layers that go into it. And I go back to core values. What are that person's life goals? What are your life goals? How do you align? What are your parenting styles? The real hard conversations around financial security for your children, financial security for the other person's children if they have them. What does that really look like? Like really sitting down and having those conversations are
Yeah.
hugely important. Once you're collectively come to an agreement or a path forward, I think it's always important to bring the kids in for a conversation because it affects their life too. If you're blending a family, they're now going from a 2 to 3 person household to 4 to 5 potentially. Like
Mhm.
what does dynamic does that look like? Do they get along with the other kids if you're blending families? Do they like the other person? Like all of that has to get discussed before plans should be made. Yeah.
Yeah. And to that point, what happens if you're, ready to commit to this person and you're ready to blend the families, but one partner's kids don't like the new partner? How do you navigate that as the parent of those kids or the new partner? How do you navigate a situation like that?
That's tough. It's hard. I think it's a lot of communication, understanding what it is about that person that they are, hesitant or they're not accepting. Because typically it is just, I don't want to replace a parent. I don't want to replace
Mhm.
my mom. I don't want to replace my dad. I still have a dad. So it's really communication and conversation. If there's hesitation there, that's because the kids are holding on to something
Mm,
typically. And I would listen to kids. They do have a lot of insight, but they also have a lot of feelings and emotions, and they went through the divorce too.
yeah, that's
So I would talk about that and then evaluate timing. Okay, would it make you feel more comfortable 5 months from now? And then build things into that 5 months that create trust, that create
mhm,
unity, that create an ability to coexist together. Because if you're just seeing this person and they're not really around your kids, and then you want to bring this person in, that's jarring.
yeah.
That's a whole nother layer of dealing with things that you're throwing on your kids that you shouldn't do. So it's about, you don't have to rush. Take your
Yeah.
time.
And so what happens if the new partner is actually participated in the end of the family structure?
It's difficult. That's a difficult dynamic because I also think that it's how that new dynamic relates to who you are. When people are just completely severed and don't want any connection or any association, that's the hardest situation to be in. Absolutely. Because it's like you're in a vacuum, operating, looking at someone else's bubble and operating out of that. It's the worst situation to be in. And I know that it is challenging and it can be challenging. You then have to, if the other person that is in the dynamic moving forward and it's completely separate, you have to create something that is healthy for you and your environment, period.
Yeah.
Again, supporting yourself emotionally, mentally, and creating calm, safety so that you can move forward. Yeah.
Yes. What do people who are newly separated most need to hear from someone like from you who has witnessed many clients make it through to the other side and become happy?
Honestly, regulating your nervous system. That is the biggest thing ever. Your nervous system, it affects what you think, it affects how you act, it affects your perception of things. And I think if you are just in it right now, ground yourself find and use resources and tools to calm your nervous system.
Yeah.
That I think is number one, because until you do that, you cannot think clearly. Usually you're all over the place. You're doing things, you forget what you're doing. It's like a trauma response. When your nervous system isn't regulated, you're forgetting stuff. You're like, oh my God, did I cook that? Did I pick this up? What's happening?
What?
And we've both been through that. We know what that's like. So that's my biggest suggestion is absolutely calming your nervous system, slowing down so that you can actually feel what's happening.
Okay, what is one small action that someone can take today that begins moving them out of the chaos and towards clarity?
I think one small action is to make a list of your priorities. Like, what are your priorities right now, today?
Mhm.
Not
That's good.
10 years from now, not a year from now, today. Is make that list of priorities and start working, moving forward from that place. It'll bring you a lot of clarity, but it also grounds you in having some control. Because, of course, as we know, when you're going through a divorce, you just completely feel out of control. So I
Totally.
would suggest that. Yeah.
When you look at everything you've learned about loss and reinvention and relationships, resilience and love, what is the ambition code according to LeAnn Lazar?
I would say the ambition code, according to me, in my view, is really the ability to stay open to yourself, to really cultivate gratitude for where you are, what you've experienced, and really everything in your life, even the relationship that you had, the marriage you had, all of it. Grateful for the position that you're in to make choices, move forward, and just surrounding yourself with environments that fuel you, that ignite you, that interest you, to just keep that curiosity going because it's life force. So I would say gratitude for sure and an openness.
That totally makes sense to me. I love that. So I know that a lot of people are going to want to find you because you really, really helped me. You've helped a lot of people.
Absolutely. Anyone can find me on Instagram at LeAnn Lazar Coaching, LinkedIn, my website, leannlazarcoaching.com. Book a call with me. It's 30 minutes of just understanding where you are. If we're aligned, if you want to work together, I have a lot of offerings and resources. I also have a course, at Chaos to Clarity, A Life After Divorce. And it's really, really helpful in some of the tools and some of the things I've talked about. But yeah, book a call. Let's just see where you are.
I highly suggest it. You have been incredibly helpful to me and I love you very much. And thank you so much for doing the pod.
You're so welcome. I love you too.
Thank you for joining us on the Ambition Code. I hope this conversation gave you the inspiration, clarity, and momentum to run through every open door in your life. The Ambition Code is created and executive produced by me, Julie Kellman Reading. Please like, subscribe, and tell us what you think. And remember, your life is waiting for you.